plasma torpedoes and beam cannons have sent the ruined hulk of your enemy's last ship blazing through the upper atmosphere of the planet below, leaving their population defenseless and exposed. Victory is yours, and conquest, it seems, is assured. So, what's your next move? According to Daniel at SpaceDock, it's simple. You broadcast a message to the government or governments of the world demanding their surrender. There would never be any need to mount a full-scale invasion using ground troops. The mere threat of your orbital firepower should be enough to ensure swift and complete capitulation. Send in a few Marines and job done. But the SpaceDock video doesn't cover every scenario, and I felt sure that, sometimes, planetary invasions would happen after all. Let's have a look at why. Let's get one very obvious situation out of the way first. Threatening to destroy everything from orbit would never be believed when the majority of the population on the planet are your own people, and you're there to liberate them from enemy rule. You probably have a local underground resistance to help you, but there would definitely be situations where you need to send in full combat troops to deal with the enemy forces stationed on the planet's surface. But even if you're attacking a world to capture it rather than liberate it, there might be reasons to mount a full-scale invasion rather than threatening from orbit. To put it plainly, the reason you'd choose to invade rather than simply demand the government's surrender is that an invasion spreads the cost over a longer time frame. You might be satisfied to run some kind of galactic protection racket. Nice planet you got there. Be a shame if someone were to, say, nuke it from orbit, and just drop in every 6 months or so to extort vast amounts of material wealth from them, leaving their government to figure out how they arrange to pay that. But if you want to take actual control of the planet, you're going to need to send in an occupying force to suppress dissent, maintain order, and enforce your laws and taxes. While they may work with the local police, they will not be able to rely on them. SpaceDock's video appears to assume that the planet's people will meekly accept their government's capitulation and let you march in and take over. It seems more likely that you will face just as fierce resistance and guerrilla warfare regardless of whether you invade by force or not. Consider the Bajoran resistance of Cardassian occupation or the Maquis resistance of Cardassian rule in Star Trek Deep Space Nine, for example. On a planet with a population similar to Earth, you would need somewhere between 12 million and 20 million troops. The lower figure is based on a ratio of 1 soldier to 600 civilians, which would match the global average of police officers to civilians in the present day. The larger figure is based on the German troop levels in Nazi-occupied France, compared with France's population just before the war. Obviously, how feasible it is to deploy so many troops within a week or two will depend on the size of your space navy and the ships in it. In World War II, the combined shipyards of the major economies produced around 350 capital ships, that's cruisers, battleships and aircraft carriers. Battleships of the time carried around 3,000 crew, and modern aircraft carriers carry a similar complement with around 2,000 aircrew on top of that. If we regard these figures as a starting point to estimate the size of a star-faring power's potential space navy, and allow some extra difficulty for building in orbit, but maybe extra resources from asteroid mining, and adjust for the economies of scale possible in space, though still needing masses of resources, we might estimate that 150 capital ships carrying 5,000 crew and 5,000 ground troops might be reasonable. That's per planet in your stellar empire, of course. If we round that up, say, to take in some of the escort ships, you can maybe shift 1 million troops in the first wave using one planet's military output. If you already conquered 20 other star systems, then you can occupy the planet no problem. But then, who is guarding your other 20 planets while you're busy conquering this one? So, you're planning to invade. Let's look at how. A lot depends on what sort of space defences the enemy has and what other military doctrines they follow. For example, do they maintain a vast ground army, or is their space fleet the main focus? If they are part of a larger political entity, how many ships are stationed in this system, and how many are in neighbouring systems? To keep this simple, we will assume that they have a space fleet similar in strength to the single planet's output that we estimated before. In present day, Earth's total serving military personnel, not including reservists, is around 17 million. We could assume that, with about 2 million in the Space Navy, that leaves 15 million on the planet. Or we could suggest that the typical proportion of a nation's military in naval service is 1 in 4, so their army could be as small as 6 million. Military doctrine says that to attack a prepared defensive position, you need a force ratio of 3 to 1. The first defensive position you need to overcome is the orbital defense and space navy. So, you'll probably need to bring 3 planets worth of ships to make your initial attack. So that's around 2 and 2.5 million troops in system when that final destroyed hulk blazes through their atmosphere. Nowhere near enough to take effective control of the planet below straight away. You could force a governmental surrender and then occupy some of the major cities, round up their military, and confiscate the weapons you find there. But you'll have riots and resistance fighters surrounding your troops quickly, and now, how do you carry out your threat to destroy the planet when you would be killing thousands of your own soldiers in the process? Instead, as soon as your fleet destroys the last enemy ship, an orbital bombardment targets every purely military target you can detect. Where it's possible to do so without inflicting civilian casualties, you take out communications hubs and transport links. During the bombardment, your dropships are already on their descent. Within 10 minutes of the bombardment ceasing, you want to have troops on the ground in a concentrated area encompassing a few cities, at least one spaceport, and key manufacturing, water, power, and food supply centres to force the local region to surrender. You're looking to create a localized advantage with your troops in a concentrated small area so that they outnumber the enemy troops in the region. Destroying the transport links should delay any reinforcements until you can bring in more troops of your own. Within a day, you hope to have taken every major objective in the target area. Some of your troops will be assigned to occupation duties, while the rest start to push outwards from the landing zone. In orbit, about a third of your force breaks off to other assignments. They communicate news of your attack success to your invasion force's staging point in the nearest star system you control, where troop transports and their escorts are waiting. Another third sets up an early warning perimeter around the star system to watch for any attempt at rescue. The final third of your force remains in orbit as a force multiplier to attack any obvious troop movements by the enemy. You will need to keep new forces coming in over the next few weeks until you achieve the numbers on world to accept the enemy's surrender and occupy the planet. Ideally, by then, you will have already accepted significant proportions of the population's surrender as your troops move into each new area and take over key facilities. Of course, if the central government offers their surrender early on in the campaign, you will accept it and deploy a division to occupy and police their capital city, with a diplomat as governor to liaise with the pre-existing governmental organisations. However, since you don't have the forces to control the entire planet yet, you would still follow the original deployment plan, securing each city with sufficient forces to coordinate lower enforcement and quell unrest. It will be like an invasion, but hopefully with fewer fights. Where organised resistance does appear, it can be dealt with in concentration before expanding the occupied area. Any planetary conquest will be an immense logistical challenge, many orders of magnitude greater than any military operation in history. Those challenges mean that winning the spaceborne fight is only one part of achieving your objective. Any interstellar power large enough will, of course, be able to meet the challenges of taking control of a planet following a swift surrender. but smaller powers will not be able to do so without considerable risk either to their own troops or to their other interstellar possessions. For these powers, a full-force invasion to establish beachheads and expand their occupation, whether opposed or by the surrender of the regional areas, would be the only way to expand their possessions. There are many variables that could lead to different feasibility levels, such as the exact nature of interstellar travel, the types of weapon systems available, and the relative technology levels of the combatants, your galactic political relationships, and those of your enemy, whether the target planet is a smaller colony of another power, or is the homeworld of its main species, and many more things to mention. However, I believe I have shown that there are some instances in which planetary invasions would happen and how they might be planned. I'm Valerie North. Thank you for listening. Please like and subscribe. Full versions of all the original tracks used in this video are available on my Patreon.